In the first chapter, section 1, we find John Calvin's teachings profound and deep, expounding on the knowledge we should seek of God and self, intertwined and true. With clarity, he starts his grand discourse, revealing wisdom's path, both old and new. He tells us that the yearning to pursue true wisdom, both of God and of our kind, comes not from our feeble human force, but from the light divine that shines so deep. For in the knowledge of the Lord we find the essence of our being, pure and true. No wisdom can compare to what is true, revealed to us through God's eternal word. In knowing Him, we come to truly find ourselves, for He is our creator kind. Presence in our lives goes far and deep, transforming hearts with His redeeming force. Yet man in pride resists this saving force, preferring darkness over what is true. He fears to plunge into the waters deep, to face the light that shines from God's own word. But in surrendering to the one so kind, he finds his purpose and his worth defined. When faced with God's great glory, we are defined, our feeble hearts subdued by sovereign force. In awe and wonder, we behold his kind and tender mercy, boundless, sweet, and true. With trembling souls, we listen to his word as it resounds deep within our spirits deep. Let us plunge into the depths so deep to seek the truth by which we're truly defined. For in the sacred pages of God's word, we'll find his grace, a powerful, mighty force. And in his presence, we will know what's true, unveiling mysteries gentle yet so kind. So as we meditate on truth so kind, let's journey into wisdom's depths so deep, with hearts attuned to hear what's pure and true. For in this quest our purpose is defined, and by God's grace we're guided by his force to walk in light and live by his life-giving word. In Book 1, Chapter 1, we find the true reflections deep, a force that shapes our kind. By Calvin's words, our souls are now defined. Welcome to my Fortress of Theology. I'm Jonathan, the Cage Stage Crusader, and I'm on a pilgrimage. Today, I'm going to begin with Book 1, Chapter 1, Section 1 of the Institutes of the Christian Religion, and that fascinating topic, wisdom. You can find in the direct description links to the institutes as well as additional lectures on this book and a few other things. So, let's begin. In the opening section of Book 1, Chapter 1 of John Calvin's renowned work, Institutes of the Christian Religion, we embark on a journey to explore the fundamental principles of our faith. Calvin, a prominent theologian and reformer of the 16th century, seeks to establish a solid foundation for understanding the Christian religion and its teachings. The purpose of this first section is to set the stage for subsequent chapters and provide a framework for comprehending the nature of true wisdom and the knowledge of God. Calvin's writings are not merely a collection of theological doctrines. They aim to guide believers in their pursuit of a deep and meaningful relationship with God. In this section, Calvin highlights the importance of knowing both God and ourselves. He argues that true and solid wisdom consists of two essential components. By gaining knowledge of God and understanding of our own nature, we can better grasp the intricate interplay between the divine and the human. Calvin emphasizes that our journey towards self knowledge begins with contemplation of the face of God. It is through the lens of God's divine presence that we can truly understand our own insignificance and the depths of our need for Him. He contends that human beings are inherently inclined to think highly of themselves until they are confronted with the reality of their injustice, vileness, and folly and impurity. Only by recognizing our own shortcomings can we truly appreciate the greatness and perfection of God. In subsequent sections of this chapter, Calvin will delve deeper into these themes, exploring the intertwined relationship between knowledge of God and knowledge of ourselves. He will address the blessings we receive from God, the consequences of the fall of humanity, and the role of humanity and fear of God in our pursuit of Him. As we embark upon this profound exploration of faith, let's approach it with an open heart and a desire to deepen our understanding of God and ourselves. May Calvin's insights serve as a guiding light in our quest for true wisdom and a closer communion with our Creator. Calvin writes, our wisdom, insofar as it ought to be deemed true and solid wisdom, consists almost entirely of two parts: the knowledge of God and of ourselves. But as these are connected together by many ties, it is not easy to determine which of these two precedes and gives birth to the other. For in the first place, no man can survey himself without forthwith turning his thoughts towards God, the God in whom he lives and moves, because it is perfectly obvious that the endowments which we possess cannot possibly be from ourselves, nay, that our very being is nothing else than subsistence in God alone. In the second place, those blessings which unceasingly distill us from heaven are like streams conducting us to the fountain. Here again, the infinitude of good which resides in God becomes more apparent from our poverty. In particular, the miserable ruin into which the revolt of the first man has plunged us compels us to turn our eyes upward, not only that while hungry and famishing we may thence ask what we want, but being aroused by fear may learn humility. There exists in man something like a world of misery, and ever since we were stripped of the divine attire, our naked shame discloses an immense series of disgraceful properties, every man being stung by the consciousness of his own unhappiness. In this way, necessarily obtains at least some knowledge of God. Thus, our feelings of ignorance, vanity, want, weakness, in short, depravity and corruption, reminds us that in the Lord and none but He dwell the true light of wisdom, solid virtue, exuberant goodness. We are accordingly urged by our own evil things to consider the good things of God, and indeed we cannot aspire to Him in earnest until we have begun to be displeased with ourselves. For what man is not disposed to rest in himself, who in fact does not thus rest, as long as he is unknown to himself? That is, so long as he is contented with his own endowments and unconscious or unmindful of his misery. Every person, therefore, on coming to the knowledge of himself, is not only urged to seek God, but also led, as by the hand, to find Him. As you can tell, in the Institutes, Calvin writes in a very dense manner, where a short paragraph contains an immense depth of content in very few words. In this section of Book 1, Chapter 1, Section 1, there are 7 points made, followed by a brief reference to the Gospel of John, Chapter 4, indicating that one should read Calvin's biblical commentary for clarification on his comments, because Calvin wrote the Institutes for students who were also studying his commentaries. The Institute provides a doctrinal summary, while the commentaries Calvin wrote provide the exegesis of the biblical text used. So, in that one paragraph that I read, the 7 points are as follows. 1, the introduction to the main topic. Our wisdom, insofar as it ought to be deemed true and solid wisdom, consists almost entirely of two parts: the knowledge of God and of ourselves. The next point is the connection between self awareness and recognition of God. No man can survey himself without forthwith turning his thoughts towards the God in whom he lives and moves, because it is perfectly obvious that the endowments which we possess cannot possibly be from ourselves, nay, that our very being is nothing else than subsistence in God alone. Point 3, God is the ultimate source of all goodness. Blessings that come from heaven lead us to the fountain God from whom they originate. The infinitude of good residing in God becomes more apparent from our poverty and need. Point 4, recognition of God's existence due to the fallen state of humanity. The revolt of the first man has caused a miserable ruin in humanity, leading us to look upward to God. Our awareness of our own unhappiness and disgraceful properties gives us at least some knowledge of God. God is the embodiment of wisdom and virtue. Our feelings of ignorance, vanity, want, weakness, depravity, and corruption remind us that true wisdom, virtue, and goodness reside in the Lord. Point 6, self discontent leading to seeking God. We are compelled to consider the good things of God because of our own evil things. We cannot earnestly seek them until we are displeased with ourselves. And point 7, the connection between self awareness and finding God. Every person who comes to know themselves is urged is urged to seek God and is led by the hand to find Him. Now, with point 1, our wisdom, insofar as it is deemed true and solid wisdom, consists almost entirely of two parts: knowledge of God and of ourselves. We can conclude that at its core, true and solid wisdom can be thought of having two important parts: understanding God and understanding ourselves. These two aspects are deeply intertwined, making it difficult to determine which comes first and gives birth to the other. It's sort of like trying to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg. So let's break this down into a relatable example. Think of yourself as standing in front of a mirror. When you look at your reflection, you see yourself as you are with all your features and characteristics. Now, imagine the mirror represents the knowledge of ourselves. As you contemplate your reflection, you start to think about the artist who skillfully created you, God. Just like the reflection cannot exist without the object it reflects, we cannot truly understand ourselves without considering the creator who made us. Recognizing that our talents, abilities, and even our very existence come from God leads us to appreciate and seek the knowledge of Him. Calvin's message highlights that true wisdom is not about knowing facts or possessing knowledge. It's a deeper understanding that encompasses both knowing ourselves and recognizing God's role in our lives. It's a journey where understanding one aspect leads us to explore and appreciate the other, like two sides of the same coin. Through reflection, blessings, acknowledging weaknesses, and seeking self improvement, we discover the interconnectedness of knowledge of God and knowledge of ourselves, making our pursuit of wisdom more meaningful and fulfilling. On to point 2, the connection between self awareness and recognition of God. No man can survey himself without forthwith turning his thoughts towards the God in whom he lives and moves, because it is perfectly obvious that the endowments which we possess cannot possibly be from ourselves, and that our very being is nothing else than subsistence in God alone. When we take a moment to reflect on ourselves and who we are, such as when we are standing in front of a mental mirror, examining our thoughts, emotions, and actions, in this introspection, we begin to realize that our existence and abilities we possess cannot be solely attributed to our own doing. In this exercise in self awareness and reflection, we uncover the undeniable truth that our being and the endowments we possess are not self created. It becomes evident that a deeper source from which our talent, existence, and place in the universe originate. This realization naturally leads us to turn our thoughts towards the idea of God, the ultimate sustainer and giver of life. The connection between self awareness and recognition of God is a profound journey of discovering our place in the grand tapestry of existence and finding meaning and purpose in the divine. This leads us to point 3. God is the ultimate source of all goodness. The blessings that come from heaven lead us to the fountain of God from whom they originate. The infinitude of good residing in God becomes more apparent from our poverty and need. The blessings we receive in our lives, whether through unexpected help, nurturing relationships, acts of kindness, or finding hope in adversity, serve as streams leading us to recognize the ultimate source of all goodness, God. These experiences and encounters with goodness reveal the infinitude of good that resides in God. It's through these glimpses of divine goodness that we come to understand and appreciate God as the ultimate fountain from which all goodness flows, enriching our lives and the world around us. On the point four, recognizing recognition of God's existence due to the fallen state of humanity. The revolt of the first man has caused a miserable ruin in humanity, leading us to look upward to God. Our awareness of our own unhappiness and the disgraceful properties we have gives us at least some knowledge of God. The fallen state of humanity, marked by historical revolts, personal mistakes, and societal struggles, prompts us to recognize the imperfections and unhappiness that exist in human nature. This awareness leads us to look upward to God, seeking understanding, guidance, and hope as we grapple with the consequences of our actions and the complexities of life. The recognition of God's existence becomes more apparent, providing a potential source of healing, redemption, and purpose in our lives. With the fifth point Calvin makes, God is the embodiment of wisdom and virtue. Our feelings of ignorance, vanity, want, weakness, depravity, and corruption remind us that true wisdom, virtue, and goodness reside in the Lord. When you observe or experience acts of depravity or corruption in the world, it may evoke feelings of sadness, anger, or disappointment. These negative experiences highlight the brokenness and moral decay within humanity. In response, you may yearn for a higher standard of goodness and justice, a standard embodied by God. The recognition of God's divine attributes serves as a moral compass guiding you towards the pursuit of true virtue and righteousness in a world tainted by corruption. Our feelings of ignorance, vanity, want, weakness, depravity, and corruption serve as powerful reminders that true wisdom, virtue, and goodness reside in the Lord. When we embrace humility, recognize the illusion of vanity, cope with our weaknesses, and confront the moral challenges of the world, we naturally seek a higher standard of guidance and strength. God, as the embodiment of wisdom and virtue, becomes the beacon of light that inspires us to grow morally and spiritually, guiding us towards the pursuit of true goodness and righteousness in our lives. The sixth point Calvin makes naturally flows out of the last, and we see that awareness of our internal sense of self discontent leads to seeking God. We are compelled to consider the good things of God because of our own evil things. We cannot earnestly seek Him until we are displeased with ourselves. Awareness of self discontent stemming from regretful actions, personal flaws, failures, and the search for meaning becomes a driving force in seeking God. When we confront our imperfections and recognize the limitations of worldly pursuits, we are compelled to consider the good things of God, the virtues that can uplift and transform our lives. The desire for personal growth, redemption, and a deeper sense of purpose guides us towards seeking God's guidance and embracing the goodness and wisdom that flow from the divine source. This point is actually fully developed in the Old Testament in the book of Ecclesiastes, where Solomon talks about how riches and pleasure and wisdom and knowledge and all this stuff is just empty of any real depth of meaning because it doesn't really connect you with the eternal. His conclusions that all things in this world are vanity and basically dust in the wind is that In God alone do we find true purpose and meaning and stuff like that. Ecclesiastes, good book. Difficult one to wrestle with, but it's good. Just go read it. The seventh and final point made in this section is the connection between self awareness and finding God. Every person who comes to know themselves is urged to seek God and is led by the hand to find Him. Self awareness becomes a crucial factor in the journey of finding God. Through self discovery, learning from life's challenges, meaningful relationships, and seeking a higher purpose, you recognize the connection between your own existence and a higher divine presence. The process of understanding yourself leads you by the hand towards seeking God, the source of ultimate meaning, guidance, and fulfillment in your life. At the end of the section one, we see there's a reference in brackets to Calvin's commentary on John chapter 4, verse 10. And the essence of his argument for basic knowledge of the Creator is summed up in his commentary, where he says, now that knowledge begins with a conviction of our poverty, for before anyone desires a remedy, he must be previously affected with the view of his distresses. Thus the Lord invites not those who have drunk enough, but the thirsty, those who are not sated, but the hungry to eat and drink. And why would Christ be sent with the fullness of the Spirit if we were not empty? In this specific instance, Calvin is pointing out that just as Jesus offered the Samaritan woman living water, a spiritual gift that would quench her spiritual thirst, God provides blessings and goodness to humanity. The connection is the notion that God's goodness, grace, and wisdom are readily available to those who seek Him, just like the living water Jesus offered to the woman at the well. It serves to emphasize the theme of recognizing God's benevolence and need to turn to Him for spiritual sustenance and fulfillment. In summary, Calvin's argument in this section is that self awareness of our internal sense of misery drives us to know that there is a God who is good, and that in seeking after that goodness, God will lead us to Himself, for He is the solution to our misery, as Calvin will expand on in further sections in later chapters. Our own poverty, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, serves as a backdrop against which God's infinite goodness shines brightly. When we realize our insufficiency that we become open, receiving and acknowledging the blessings that flow from heaven. In these moments, we become aware of the loving care and generosity of God who provides for us abundantly. In seeking wisdom's truth, we journey near to know ourselves, the soul's unveiled gaze. Yet never true self knowledge we obtain until we have gazed upon God's radiant face, descending from this contemplation high to find our essence in His holy light. In pride's embrace, we ourselves so bright, with self assuredness we stand too near, unmindful of the one who dwells on high. We bask in shallow depths of our own gaze, and once we turn our eyes to seek God's face, we see the depths of sin we must attain. Deep within, the darkened heart can't attain the pure and righteous path so filled with light. But in God's presence, we confront our face, and in His holy mirror, we draw near with humbled hearts. We cast our tearful gaze, acknowledging our need, we look on high. In shadows false, we grope in darkness high. With blind conceit, our hearts can't truly obtain. But as we lift our eyes to Christ's pure gaze, we find the path to grace, the way so bright. The veil is lifted, we draw more near to see our sin reflected in God's face. We can't escape the truth in God's own face. No earthly mask can veil the truth on high. We need not fear, for God is ever near. To lead us gently, we may attain the virtues that His wondrous light ignites as we walk humbly in His guiding gaze. In seeking God, we find His loving gaze, the source of goodness shining from His face. In His embrace, our hearts are set alight. We find our truest self as we draw high, and in his love we fully do attain the grace that sets our longing spirits near. So let us seek his love, his presence near, and in his mercy find the Father's gaze. With hearts transformed, we fully will attain the likeness of the one whose love we face, ascending to the heights where he resides high, and bask forever in his glorious light. In God's own light, we find our hearts ablaze. His loving gaze draws us to stand more near. With humble souls, his glory we attain. Until next time, follow Jesus, who is the way.